from external threats rather than internal struggles. This rise in nationalism isn't just confined to politics, it's cultural as well. The Canadian flag, which had become a symbol of protest due to the controversial Freedom Convoy movement, is now being reclaimed by the public. No longer just a flag, it's become.
As President Trump walks back tariffs on most products from Mexico and Canada, again, Canada says retaliatory tariffs will stay in place until that pause is permanent.
At the beginning, it seemed like nothing more than a threat. Then it became a promise. And now, it's a reality. In a move that shook North America to its core, U.S. President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian goods. Markets dropped, businesses panicked, and suddenly, Canada, America's longtime ally and closest trading partner, found itself at economic odds with its neighbor. But rather than back down, Canada responded in a way that few had anticipated. Known for its politeness and diplomacy, Canada erupted in frustration, igniting a wave of economic resistance that quickly spread across the nation. Businesses, consumers, and politicians alike began making dramatic shifts. Some opted to boycott American-made products entirely, while others sought Canadian or European alternatives to replace U.S. goods. At Graham's Pizza, a small yet beloved pizza spot in Toronto, owner Graham Paler took immediate action. Gone were the Californian tomatoes, Ohio-made pepperoni, and even Coca-Cola. Instead, he replaced them with Italian tomatoes, locally sourced meats, and sparkling water sweetened with maple syrup. His message to his customers was unmistakable. If Trump wanted to squeeze Canada's economy, Canadians would respond in their own way. It wasn't just small businesses making these changes. Across Canada, companies, ranging from grocery stores to liquor retailers, began reassessing their reliance on U.S. imports. Online platforms promoting Canadian-made goods saw a surge in traffic as thousands of people sought out local alternatives to American products. Even in casual conversations, frustration with U.S. policies had transformed into full-blown resentment. This shift was about more than just economic retaliation. It was about national identity. For decades, Canada and the U.S. shared one of the world's most powerful trade relationships, with the two nations boasting the longest undefended border, deep cultural connections, and an annual trade network valued at over $760 billion. But that once unshakable bond was now under serious strain. The notion that the U.S. could treat Canada as an expendable economic partner ignited outrage across the country. And this outrage spilled over in unexpected ways. In arenas traditionally focused on sports, Canadian fans began making their feelings known. At hockey games, audiences could be heard loudly booing the U.S. national anthem. In a particularly heated Canada-U.S. match, tensions flared and players exchanged punches, with the animosity from politics spilling into the game. Even in the travel industry, the backlash was evident. Canadian tourism to the U.S. saw a significant dip as people canceled trips to places like Florida, California, and New York. Longtime shoppers who regularly crossed the border now chose to keep their money at home, directing their spending toward local businesses instead of American imports. At the heart of all this was a growing awareness among Canadians that they had become too economically reliant on the U.S. The tariffs acted as a wake-up call, prompting both consumers and businesses to reconsider their dependence on American goods. The political ramifications of this shift were profound. Just months prior, Canada was embroiled in a political crisis, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's approval ratings plummeting and his leadership being called into question. The public's frustration with him had grown so intense that he announced his resignation, leaving his party vulnerable ahead of the upcoming election. Then came Trump. The tariffs and his open hostility toward Canada completely altered the political landscape. The impact of the tariffs has been profound, bringing Canadians together in a way that few could have predicted. Internal political divisions, which once ran deep, have quickly faded as the country unified against what many viewed as an economic attack from their southern neighbor. Support for the ruling Liberal Party surged, with Canadians rallying behind their government in a show of national solidarity. Even the opposition party has had to adjust its messaging. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who was widely expected to be Canada's next prime minister, has been forced to shift his campaign focus. What had once been a platform built around domestic economic issues and criticism of government policies is now evolving into a Canada-first approach, one that emphasizes protecting the country from external threats rather than internal struggles. This rise in nationalism isn't just confined to politics, it's cultural as well. The Canadian flag, which had become a symbol of protest due to the controversial Freedom Convoy movement, is now being reclaimed by the public. No longer just a flag, it's become a powerful statement, a declaration that Canada will not be pushed around. The business community has also felt this shift. One of the most striking examples came from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who ordered government-run liquor stores to remove all U.S.-made alcohol from their shelves. This single decision is expected to impact nearly $1 billion in U.S. liquor sales. But Ford didn't stop there. He also announced a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S., targeting states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, where millions rely on Canadian power. For many Canadians, this is no longer just a trade dispute. It's a matter of respect. Trump's dismissive attitude toward Canada, referring to the country as the 51st state and mockingly calling Prime Minister Trudeau a governor rather than a leader, has only fueled the flames of resentment. What was once a relationship built on mutual cooperation now feels like one of forced submission. And for the first time in years, Canada is saying frustration is not just confined to everyday citizens. It's reached the highest levels of government. British Columbia Premier David Eby recently remarked that the relationship between Canada and the U.S. has been irrevocably changed. Canada, he warned, would never again allow itself to be so dependent on the U.S. Looking back, this isn't the first time Canada has had to respond to Trump's tariffs. During his first term, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminum, triggering a wave of Canadian countermeasures. But this time feels different. There's a palpable sense that something fundamental has shifted, one that suggests the relationship between the two countries may never return to what it once was. Even as tensions rise, there's a lingering question: what comes next? Course of aggressive trade policies. Canadian leaders, businesses, and consumers are now being forced to reassess their dependence on American markets. The numbers tell the story clearly. Canada is the largest energy supplier to the United States, providing over 50% of America's imported oil and nearly all of its imported natural gas. Cross-border power grids also mean that millions of American homes depend on Canadian electricity. And when it comes to critical minerals, resources necessary for everything from smartphones to electric vehicles, Canada has long been a cornerstone of the U.S. supply chain. In short, Canada has been essential to America's energy security. But now, everything is shifting. With tariffs making trade with the U.S. increasingly unpredictable, Canada is accelerating its efforts to diversify its trade relationships. Instead of sending the bulk of its oil, gas, Canada is now looking to Europe and Asia, two regions eager to establish stable, long-term energy partnerships. One of the most significant changes is occurring in the oil and gas sector. For years, Canadian crude oil has flowed south into the U.S., where American refineries rely on Alberta's heavy oil to produce fuel and other petroleum products. But the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline has opened up a whole new world of possibilities. With nearly triple the capacity to ship oil to the Pacific coast, Canada can now send its resources to energy-hungry nations like Japan and South Korea. No longer bound by the U.S. as its primary energy partner, Canada is positioning itself as a global energy supplier. Europe, too, is emerging as a key player in Canada's energy future. The war in Ukraine has forced European countries to rethink their dependence on Russian energy, creating a demand for reliable alternatives. With its vast natural gas reserves, Canada is stepping in to fill the gap. Liquefied natural gas projects along trade agreement, broader global market. For decades, the United States was Canada's natural economic partner.